The streets of Washington are unusually quiet. The normally busy corridors of the Capitol feel restrained, almost hollow. Cafeterias are empty, parking lots half full, and corridors of the Capitol echo with a kind of bureaucratic silence that the United States hasn't heard in decades. The federal government has entered its 36th day of shutdown, the longest in American history, and the country's political system seems caught in a cycle of blame, fatigue, and symbolism. Outside the Capitol Visitor Center, a printed notice flaps gently against a locked glass door, closed due to a lapse in appropriations. Similar signs hang across museums, botanical gardens, and national parks, visual reminders of a government at a standstill. Tens of thousands of public workers remain without pay. Some are taking extra jobs. Others are queuing for food assistance. In New York and Chicago, local charities have begun daily meal lines for furloughed staff, a scene more familiar to economic recessions than to a budget dispute in the world's largest economy. The argument that brought Washington here sounds deceptively simple. Congress has failed to pass a temporary spending bill. Behind that failure, however, lies a deeper ideological clash. Democrats are insisting on expanded healthcare provisions and social protections. Republicans, led by President Donald Trump, accuse them of blocking vital funding for national security and administrative reforms. Neither side seems ready to yield. From the White House, President Trump has chosen to frame the deadlock not as political gridlock, but as an act of self-destruction by his rivals. Standing before a group of Republican senators, he draws on a startling historical analogy, one that immediately captures headlines worldwide. I think they are kamikaze pilots, Trump says. I just got back from Japan. I was talking about the kamikaze pilots there. I think these people, the Democrats, are kamikazes. They'll destroy the country when it comes down to it. The comment, delivered half in jest but wholly deliberate, sends a ripple through Washington's media circles. The term kamikaze originates from Japan's wartime era, referring to fighter pilots who carried out suicide missions against enemy targets in the final years of World War II. For historians, it evokes national sacrifice and tragic fanaticism. For political commentators, it's a symbol of total devotion to a cause, even at catastrophic cost. Trump's comparison ignites a debate not only about language, but about leadership itself. Was the president illustrating his frustration with democratic resistance or deliberately invoking an image designed to provoke? His critics say it's another example of his confrontational style, while supporters argue it reflects the severity of Washington's impasse. Meanwhile, for millions of Americans, the metaphor feels less symbolic and more tangible. Federal employees are missing a second paycheck. Airport security lines grow longer as unpaid Transportation Security Administration officers call in sick. In rural areas, food stamp programs are running on reserves, and in federal courts, hearings are postponed as clerks and translators are furloughed. The mood across the nation alternates between anger and exhaustion. In Washington, protesters gather near the Mall with banners that read "Stop Starving Families" and "End the Shutdown Now." Their chants mix with the hum of passing traffic, the sound of a city still functioning, but only just. Political strategists note that shutdowns are not new in US politics, but never before has one lasted this long or carried such visible consequences. Past impasses like those during the Clinton and Obama administrations ended within days or weeks, often through backroom deals. This time, the personal dynamics between Trump and Democratic leaders, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, have hardened into mutual mistrust. Every televised press conference becomes a battle of narratives. Who's to blame? Who's holding the country hostage? Who will blink first? Trump, who thrives on media confrontation, uses the crisis to rally his base. He frames himself as a leader under siege, demanding that Democrats put America first by ending what he calls political obstruction. Democrats counter that the shutdown is a direct result of the president's refusal to compromise on spending priorities, accusing him of turning workers into collateral damage. Behind closed doors, attempts at negotiation continue. Officials from the Office of Management and Budget shuttle between the Hill and the White House, while state governors warn that prolonged paralysis could ripple through local economies. Public confidence in Congress falls to record lows, and economists warn that if the freeze extends beyond 6 weeks, the GDP could contract measurably in the first quarter. At the symbolic heart of the standoff stands a question: how far can political conviction go before it becomes self-defeating? That question is precisely what Trump's Kamikaze remark dramatizes, and perhaps unintentionally it defines the tone of the crisis. To understand the weight of that comparison, historians revisit the story of the original Kamikaze pilots. In wartime Japan, these young men were trained to crash their aircraft, sometimes rudimentary, rocket-assisted gliders directly into enemy ships. They believed, or were told, that their sacrifice would save the empire. Photographs from archives show pilots posing calmly before departure, wearing white headbands marked with the rising sun day.
In museums across Japan today, replicas of those planes, such as the rocket-powered Oka or Cherry Blossom, stand as artifacts of a nation's complex memory: courage, despair, obedience,
and tragedy interwoven. By invoking that history, Trump introduced a metaphor of devotion and destruction into the heart of a budget dispute. For some Americans, the image seems exaggerated; for others, chillingly accurate. Democrats, they argue, would rather see government services collapse than concede political ground. Democrats, in turn, accuse the president of weaponizing historical trauma to distract from his own inflexibility. Cable news panels dissect the quote for days. Editorials in the Washington Post and the New York Times describe it as reckless rhetoric, while conservative outlets defend it as a metaphor for partisan extremism. Polls show the public evenly split over who bears primary responsibility for the shutdown, but nearly 3/4 say they want compromise. As the stalemate drags on, scenes across the country illustrate the cost of political symbolism. In Virginia, a single mother and federal employee describes selling her car to pay rent. In Florida, a said Coast Guard officer's family sets up a GoFundMe page to buy groceries. And in Alaska, park rangers warn of rising maintenance damage as national parks sit untended. The human stories turn an abstract fiscal debate into a moral one. How long can leaders hold out when real lives are being disrupted? When does political principle become political neglect? Inside the White House, aides insist that Trump remains confident a deal will emerge. He continues to host small meetings with Senate Republicans, emphasizing loyalty and discipline. Each televised appearance is carefully framed. The president, surrounded by flags, documents spread across a polished table, speaking with controlled frustration. For him, the optics matter as much as the outcome. The Democrats, led by Speaker Pelosi, project calm defiance. They emphasize the need to protect healthcare and social programs, portraying themselves as defenders of ordinary citizens against executive overreach. Pelosi, seasoned in the choreography of negotiation, appears alongside furloughed workers and repeats a simple refrain: end the shutdown, open the government. Then we can talk. The impasse becomes a test not only of policy, but of endurance, who can better withstand public pressure and media scrutiny. Political historians observe that American shutdowns often arise from structural weaknesses within the federal budgeting process itself. Because Congress must pass annual spending bills for multiple departments, any unresolved dispute can halt the entire system. But this particular shutdown, they note, also symbolizes a cultural divide, one between two visions of government's role in society.
To Trump's supporters, limited spending and strong executive authority represent efficiency and strength. To Democrats, robust welfare programs and institutional checks safeguard democracy from excess power.
Neither vision easily coexists. Meanwhile, everyday Americans grow restless. Businesses delay hiring, tourism declines as parks and museums remain closed. And online, the hashtag number End the Shutdown trends daily, reflecting the mood of a weary nation. In this atmosphere, Trump's kamikaze remark gains a strange afterlife, quoted remixed, debated, and memified. Late-night comedians parody it, historians explain its wartime origins, Japanese diplomats quietly avoid comment. In Tokyo, some editorial writers call it a reminder of the dangers of political fanaticism, while others treat it as just another Trumpism, provocative, performative, and media savvy. But for those living through the freeze, the humour has worn thin. Each day the shutdown continues, its costs multiply, unpaid wages, delayed contracts, eroding trust. Analysts estimate the loss to the US economy at billions of dollars, a figure larger than the disputed budget gap that started it all. As the standoff reaches its 6th week, behind the scenes, negotiations finally begin to show movement. Moderate senators from both parties draft a short-term funding plan to reopen agencies while broader talks proceed. The president signals conditional openness, but demands what he calls a win for the American taxpayer. Democrats cautiously express hope, but refuse any deal framed as political surrender. Outside Washington, the American public listens, waits, and counts the days. For them, the debate over kamikaze politics is less about ideology than about survival, whether their paychecks will clear, whether their schools will reopen, whether faith in governance can still be restored. The cameras return once more to the Capitol dome, glinting in the winter sun, an enduring symbol of democracy, but this season also of dysfunction. The wind carries across its steps the sound of reporters' questions, the shuffle of staffers, and somewhere the echo of a remark that has already entered the political lexicon. They're kamikaze pilots, the president had said, a line that fused history, frustration, and theatre into a single moment of television. It may have been hyperbole, it may have been strategy. But in a capital defined by stalemate, it captured something larger, a sense that America's political system was willing to crash itself, if only to prove who was at the controls. And as Washington awaits the next move, the next vote, the next press conference, the next metaphor, the country keeps running on momentum, on patience, and on the hope that reason, not rhetoric, will eventually break the deadlock.